He married her to save his honor, but she stole his heart. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Good. Now, let us return to tonight's main story, and it all begins with something no one would ever expect. Rain hammered against the windows of a quiet 24-hour cafe in downtown Chicago. Neon lights flickered outside, painting the glass with streaks of red and blue. The air smelled of espresso and thunder. At the corner table sat Graham Cole, the 33-year-old CEO of Cole & Finch Industries, a man who once had the world at his feet, until this morning. Every headline screamed betrayal. CEO calls off wedding hours before ceremony. Investors were panicking, stock prices were plummeting, and his phone would not stop vibrating with calls he refused to answer. Across the room, Clara Evans wiped down the counter, pretending not to notice the tall man in a drenched navy coat. She was working her third shift that week, anything to keep up with rent and her mother's medical bills. Her sketchbook sat open near the register, pencil marks smudged by coffee stains. Graham looked up from his untouched espresso. There was something about the way Clara kept sketching, even after midnight, that cut through the noise in his head. Determined, tired, real. And that was when something in him broke. He stood, walked over, and without so much as a greeting said, "Miss Evans, marry me." The cafe went silent. The one other customer, an old man reading the paper, lowered his glasses. Clara blinked, half convinced she had misheard. "I am sorry. What did you just say?" Graham slid a folder across the table. 6 months. A legal marriage. You will be compensated fairly. I need a wife by Friday. Her mouth fell open. This is insane. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You would be surprised how many insane things fix everything. A rumble of thunder shook the glass. Clara stared at him, caught between laughter and disbelief. Her first thought was that it had to be some cruel joke, but the look in his eyes, calm, serious, desperate, was not joking. She flipped open the folder. Inside, a drafted agreement with both their names already printed. Her name, Clara Evans, typed neatly beneath his. She felt the room tilt. "Why me?" she asked. "You were the first person who looked me in the eye tonight without judgment," he said simply, "and I do not have time to find another." It was reckless, unethical, maybe even immoral. Yet somewhere in the madness of his offer was a strange, brutal honesty. Clara laughed under her breath. "You are offering marriage like a business deal." "It is exactly that," he replied. "You help me repair my reputation. I help you with whatever you need. No feelings, no questions." The clock behind them clicked toward midnight. She should have walked away. Any sane person would have. But as her phone buzzed with another hospital alert, payment overdue, the laughter died in her throat. "I will think about it," she whispered. "Do not take too long," he said, sliding his business card toward her. Reputations do not wait. He stood and left, the doorbell chiming behind him. The folder remained on the table, pages fluttering in the wind from the half-open door. Clara looked down. On the last page, under the line marked signature of spouse, he had already signed his name in bold black ink, Graham Cole. The sound of rain filled the silence. Her reflection in the window stared back, torn between reason and survival. Would you ever agree to a deal like this, love with rules? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Because for Clara, that single moment would change everything. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the streets slick and shining under the gray Chicago sky. Clara Evans sat by her small apartment window, staring at the business card that now lay beside a half-empty cup of coffee. The bold silver letters spelled his name clearly this time. Graham Cole, CEO, Cole & Finch Industries. Her phone buzzed again. The hospital billing department left another voicemail about her mother's overdue surgery payment. Clara turned off the phone and pressed her palms against her eyes. Every option she had was running out. The cafe job barely covered rent, and the university had frozen her scholarship until she cleared her outstanding balance. On the counter, the folder Graham had given her the night before was still there. She flipped it open. The pages were clean, typed in legal precision, each line a cold reminder that the offer was real. A legal marriage, 6 months, 5 public appearances, complete confidentiality, payment upon completion. Her chest tightened as she read the clause again. No emotional involvement between parties. Breach of contract nullifies compensation. The words stung. She pushed the folder away and whispered to herself, "Who writes rules against feelings?" Across the city, Graham Cole sat inside his corner office, 30 floors above Michigan Avenue. The skyline stretched before him, but it felt more like a cage than a view. His assistant stood by the desk, giving updates about plummeting stock values. The press was waiting outside, hungry for another scandal headline. "Have legal prepare the documents," Graham said quietly. "They are ready, sir," the assistant replied. "But do you really plan to go through with this?" "I do not have the luxury of doubt," he said. At exactly noon, Clara walked into the glass tower lobby of Cole and Finch Industries. Every surface gleamed like it had never known dust. She wore a second-hand blazer and clutched her sketchbook like a shield. When she reached the top floor, Graham was waiting by the window, a dark silhouette against the pale skyline. He turned as the elevator doors closed behind her. "You came," he said. "I came to say that this is madness," Clara replied. "I agree," Graham answered. "But it is efficient madness." He gestured toward the conference table. The contract sat there, beside 2 pens. She took a seat, her heart pounding. He began to read aloud the rules, his voice steady and detached. 1. No emotional attachment. 2. You will attend 5 corporate or charity events as my wife. 3. You will maintain discretion about our agreement. 4. After 6 months, the marriage will be legally dissolved. Clara interrupted softly. "And if someone breaks the rules?" Graham looked up from the paper. "Then they lose everything." Silence stretched between them. The city hummed outside, and the ticking clock filled the room. Clara's fingers brushed the pen. She could feel his eyes watching her, calm but unreadable. She thought about her mother in the hospital, about the life she had been holding together with tips and coffee shifts. "Why me?" she asked again. "Because you did not look at me like a headline," Graham said. "You looked at me like a person." Clara exhaled slowly. Every instinct told her to run, but another voice whispered that maybe this was her only way out. She picked up the pen. The ink glided smoothly as she signed her name. When she was done, Graham added his signature beneath hers with one precise stroke. He slid a simple silver band across the table. "For public appearances," he said. She took it hesitantly, the cool metal pressing into her palm like a secret she was not ready to carry. As they stood, the assistant entered quietly. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole," he said with forced politeness. Graham nodded. Clara did not. She only looked at her reflection in the window, a woman who had just sold her piece for survival. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the deal, Mrs. Cole." She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, professional, but something in his gaze flickered not arrogance, not pity, something far more complicated. "Would you ever sign a contract like this, a marriage built on rules and deadlines? Share your thoughts in the comments below." Because this was only the beginning, and neither of them had any idea how dangerous a simple signature could become. The first week of marriage felt less like a beginning and more like a business transaction wrapped in silence. Clara Evans, now legally, Clara Cole, moved into Graham's penthouse overlooking the Chicago River. The elevator opened directly into a space that looked like a luxury catalog. Glass walls, white marble floors, and a piano no one played. Everything gleamed, but nothing felt alive. The contract rules hung between them like invisible walls. Graham worked late most nights, leaving before dawn and returning long after midnight. When he was home, he stayed behind his study door, the soft glow of his laptop spilling into the dark hallway. Clara unpacked her few belongings into a single guest room. The rest of the apartment looked untouched, too perfect, too curated. Even the air smelled like money. On the second evening, she found a printed schedule on the kitchen counter, typed in the same precise font as the contract. Public appearance shown. Gala for Innovation fundraiser. Attire, formal. Underneath, his neat handwriting read, "Dress will be provided. Car leaves at 6:30 p.m. She shook her head with a small laugh. "Efficient madness," she whispered, repeating his words from the meeting. That night, Graham found her standing near the grand window, staring at the city lights. He spoke without looking at her. "I hope the apartment meets your needs." "It is bigger than my entire college building," she said quietly. He finally turned to face her. "This is temporary, Clara. Remember that." "I know," she replied. "We both signed the rules." For a moment, their eyes locked, two people trapped by logic, pretending control was freedom. The following evening, they attended the first gala together. Cameras flashed as soon as they stepped out of the black car. Graham placed a steady hand on her back, the touch practiced, not affectionate. He smiled for the press like a man who had built an empire from ice. Inside the ballroom, the chandeliers blazed, and champagne flowed like water. Clara stayed close, unsure of what to say to billionaires and investors. A journalist approached, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Cole, how does it feel to be married to one of Chicago's most powerful men?" Clara blinked, aware of the contract clause about public statements. "Power is relative," she said calmly. "Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones in front of cameras." The reporter smiled, intrigued. Interesting answer. Later, when they returned home, Graham surprised her with a short nod. "You handled that well. You kept your composure." "Thank you," she replied, setting down her clutch. "Years of serving impatient customers prepare you for worse." His mouth twitched like he almost smiled. "Maybe I should add that to the next contract." Quote. Her laugh was soft but genuine. "Please do not." For a brief second, something unspoken passed between them, a sliver of humor breaking through the formality. Then he turned away, the mask returning. The next morning, Clara walked into the kitchen to find a handwritten list beside her coffee mug. 5 rules of the agreement, rewritten in his own words. No emocional involvement. Attend events as required. Maintain discretion. Respect privacy. Remember, this ends in 6 months. She stared at the last line, then added a 6th with her pen. 6. Try to survive it. When Graham saw the note later, he paused, then placed the pen down without erasing it. That small act said more than words could. As days turned into weeks, Clara began to notice things about him, how he stared out the window too long, how he avoided photographs that showed families, how he drank coffee at midnight because sleep never came. She wanted to ask why, but the contract had built walls around their hearts. Would you ever agree to rules like these, clear on paper but impossible in life? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Because for Clara and Graham, every rule written in ink was about to be tested by something neither of them could control. 3 weeks into the arrangement, the city was preparing for the annual Innovation Charity Gala. For Graham Cole, it was just another event on his schedule. For Clara, it felt like walking into a test she had never studied for. The morning of the gala, a team of stylists arrived at the penthouse. They filled the marble living room with garment bags, boxes of jewelry, and clouds of perfume. One of them handed Clara a gown the color of midnight, stitched with subtle silver threads that shimmered under light. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Graham looked up from his phone and froze. For the first time, his expression faltered. "You look appropriate," he said, almost too quickly. Clara raised an eyebrow. "Appropriate is such a romantic word, Mr. Cole." He cleared his throat. "I meant elegant." "Better," she replied. And for a moment, the air between them shifted, less cold, less contractual. At 6:30 sharp, they descended to the waiting car. The ride was silent, but not entirely uncomfortable. The city lights streaked past the windows like memories neither wanted to name. The gala was held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, a tower of glass and chandeliers that smelled of wealth and polished ambition. The moment they entered, flashbulbs exploded. Reporters swarmed. Graham's hand settled on Clara's lower back again, guiding her forward as if they had done this 100 times. "Smile when they ask for photos," he whispered. "It looks more believable that way." She tilted her head slightly toward him. "Then maybe stop looking like you are at a funeral." "Goo." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Noted." Inside the ballroom, the hum of voices filled the air, mixing with the soft rhythm of a jazz band. Investors, celebrities, and philanthropists turned to watch the mysterious new Mrs. Cole. Clara felt hundreds of eyes tracing her every step. At the center table, an older businessman leaned toward her with a smug smile. "So, Mrs. Cole, rumor says you met our Graham under very interesting circumstances." Clara sipped her champagne, steady as glass. "I suppose that depends on what you find interesting, sir." The man chuckled. "Love is rarely a business plan. Neither is respect," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Yet both can fail without effort." The people around the table fell silent. Graham glanced sideways at her, half shocked, half impressed. Later that night, when the host announced the charity results, Graham stood to deliver his speech. His words were measured, safe, polished. But when the applause faded, he turned unexpectedly and held up the crystal award they had received. "This," he said, "belongs to my wife, who reminded me that dignity is not something you buy, it is something you choose to keep." Cameras flashed. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks as polite applause filled the room. In the car ride home, neither spoke for a while. The city glowed beyond the windows, streets glistening with recent rain. Finally, Clara broke the silence. You did not have to say that. I did, Graham answered softly. You earned it. When they arrived back at the penthouse, he stopped by the elevator and handed her the award. You should keep it. She looked at him uncertain. It has your name on it. Maybe next year it will have yours. He turned away, but Clara caught the faintest trace of a smile before he disappeared down the hallway. Inside her room, she placed the crystal trophy beside her sketchbook. The two objects looked strange together, one polished, one worn, but somehow they belonged. For the first time since signing that contract, she felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something dangerous enough to feel like the start of it. And if you were in Clara's place, standing beside a man who offered a deal but gave you respect instead, would you trust it? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Because from this night forward, the rules that once protected them would begin to blur, one heartbeat at a time. The morning after the gala, the penthouse felt strangely alive. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls, catching dust in the air that looked almost like glitter. The crystal award sat on the counter, its engraved name shining under the light. Clara Evans No. Clara Cole poured herself coffee and watched the city wake up below. Graham entered the kitchen, still in his gray dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. For once, he looked human, not like the headline version of himself. Good morning, Clara said, breaking the silence. He nodded. You handled yourself well last night. The board is pleased. Clara gave him a faint smile. And what about you? He hesitated. I am impressed. That almost sounds like a compliment. It is, he said simply. For a brief second, they stood across from each other, two strangers sharing a kitchen that looked more like a showroom than a home. Then he reached for a mug, and the moment passed. When Graham left for work, Clara sat by the window sketching. She drew people she saw on the streets, couples holding hands, delivery drivers, a woman walking her dog, ordinary lives. She realized she missed ordinary more than she had ever missed comfort. That afternoon, a delivery arrived, a note and a dress box. The note read, Charity Auction, tonight at 7, black tie. Underneath, his initials GC. At 7, they stepped out again, but this time something felt different. The photographers still shouted their names, but Graham's hand lingered a little longer at her back. Inside, the ballroom glowed in candlelight. The crowd was smaller, softer. During the auction, the host announced, Our next item, an original painting donated anonymously to support the Children's Shelter Fund. Clara froze. The painting projected onto the screen was hers, one of the sketches she had left behind at the cafe the night he had first approached her. Her heartbeat thudded in her chest. She turned to Graham, whispering, How did you get that? I bought the cafe, he said quietly. They kept some of your drawings on the wall. I thought it would raise more here. Why would you do that? He looked at her, eyes steady. Because someone should see what you can do. Before she could answer, the bidding started. The painting sold for $15,000 to an anonymous buyer. The crowd clapped. Clara stood speechless, the corners of her eyes stinging. After the event, they rode home in silence. In the elevator, she finally spoke. That was not part of the contract. No, Graham said, voice low. Neither was last night. Back inside the penthouse, Clara set down her clutch. You keep breaking your own rules. So are you, he said. The words hung between them like a challenge neither wanted to win. Later that night, Clara walked into the kitchen and found him sitting at the counter with his tie undone. He looked exhausted. Without thinking, she made tea and placed the cup in front of him. You should sleep, she said softly. He stared at the steam rising from the cup. I forgot what that feels like. Peace or sleep, she asked. Both, he admitted. For a moment, their eyes met, and neither looked away. Something shifted then, subtle, fragile, but real. The contract said no emotions, no attachments, no truth. Yet truth was all that filled the room. Clara turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Thank you, Clara. She paused at the doorway. For what? For reminding me what being seen feels like. She did not answer. She only smiled faintly and walked away, her pulse louder than her footsteps. Do you believe real love can grow from something fake? Be honest, and tell us in the comments below. Because for Clara and Graham, the line between pretending and feeling had just disappeared, and neither of them would ever be the same again. By late October, Chicago's wind had turned sharp, slicing through the streets and rattling the glass walls of the penthouse. Inside, the storm outside seemed to echo something inside, both of them loud, restless, impossible to ignore. Clara Cole had grown used to the rhythm of her new life. Early morning sketching, evenings at events, nights filled with silence. Yet the silence had begun to feel different lately, almost comfortable. It was no longer a wall. It was a question neither of them dared to ask. That night, Graham returned home earlier than usual. The storm had delayed flights and closed bridges. He looked drenched and exhausted, his coat dripping onto the marble floor. "You are home early," Clara said, setting aside her sketchbook. "Traffic was a disaster," he replied. "I decided drowning in paperwork could wait." She handed him a towel and poured tea without asking. "You should change before you catch a cold." Graham took the cup and stared at it for a long moment. "You always make tea when I cannot breathe," he said quietly. Clara blinked, unsure how to answer. "It is the only cure I know." Lightning flashed across the sky, filling the room with white light. For a second, the city disappeared, and all that existed was the sound of rain and the space between them. They ate dinner together for the first time without schedule or cameras. She reheated leftover pasta, and he actually laughed when she teased him about not knowing how to use a microwave. "I am a CEO, not a chef," he said. "That explains the frozen meals in the freezer," she replied. He smiled, genuine and warm. "You pay too much attention." "Someone has to," she said softly. The power flickered, then went out completely. The entire skyline dimmed to black. Clara found candles in a drawer, lighting one after another until the room glowed in soft gold. Shadows danced on the walls, making the penthouse look almost human for once. "Looks better like this," she said. Graham leaned against the counter, the candlelight flickering across his face. "You are right. It feels less empty." They sat by the window, the storm roaring outside. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Graham broke the silence. "I used to love storms. My mother did too. She said thunder meant the world was washing itself clean." "What happened to her?" Clara asked gently. "She left when I was 15, he said. No goodbye, no reason. I think I stopped trusting anything unpredictable after that, even love." Clara looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe love is not meant to be predictable. He met her gaze, and something fragile and dangerous moved between them. "I keep wondering," he said, "if the rules we made were to protect us, or to keep us lonely." Clara smiled sadly. "Maybe both." Rain poured harder, tapping against the glass like a steady drumbeat. Graham reached for her hand. It was not planned. It was not logical. It just happened. She did not pull away. The air felt electric, charged with something neither could name. The candle flame wavered, throwing gold light across their faces. Then, as quickly as it started, Graham withdrew his hand. "We should get some sleep," he said softly, voice shaking more than he wanted to admit. Clara nodded, but her heart was still racing. She stood and turned off the remaining candles one by one, leaving the room in darkness again. As she reached the hallway, he spoke behind her. "Clara?" "Yes? Thank you for not asking me to explain." Quote. She paused, then said, "Some things do not need words. Would you risk breaking the rules if your heart told you it was real? Let us know what you think in the comments below." Because from that night on, the contract between them was no longer just written on paper, it was written in silence, in tea, and in the quiet thunder of two hearts learning to beat together. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a pale sky stretched over Chicago like paper after rain. But peace never lasts long in the world of the wealthy. Clara Cole woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. Dozens of notifications filled the screen news headlines, gossip articles, flashing red alerts that made her stomach twist. Cole's marriage scandal, contracted wife exposed. Her hands went cold. She scrolled through one article after another, each showing leaked photos of their contract. Every clause, every rule, every signature published for millions to see. The same signature she had made with shaking hands now stared back at her from a digital screen. Graham's name was everywhere. Fraud, manipulation, image control. The media called their marriage a corporate performance, and Clara a paid actress. The knock on the bedroom door was sharp. Graham entered, his expression grim. He was already in a suit, tie knotted perfectly, eyes dark with exhaustion. "They have it," she said. "I know." "Who leaked it?" He exhaled slowly. "Someone inside the board. Possibly Walker. He has been waiting to ruin me for months." Clara's voice trembled. "They are calling me a liar. They think I did it for money." His jaw tightened. "I will handle this." She shook her head. "Handle it? You made a deal that turned my life into a headline? How do you plan to handle that?" Graham looked like he wanted to speak but could not find the words. For the first time since she met him, he seemed lost. Within hours, reporters gathered outside the building. Cameras flashed like lightning. Clara could hear their voices echoing up the glass tower. "Mrs. Cole, how much did he pay you? Was it a real marriage or a publicity stunt?" Security escorted her to a private elevator, but the noise still found its way in. When the doors closed, her chest ached. She wanted to disappear. At the office, Graham faced the board of directors. The tension was suffocating. Walker, the man who had leaked the story, leaned back in his chair with a smug grin. "You have embarrassed this company," Walker said. "Your resignation is the only logical step." Graham stayed silent for a long moment before saying, "If stepping down protects the people who work here, I will do it." Walker smirked. "Including your wife?" Graham's voice hardened, especially her. Outside, Clara watched the press conference live on television. She saw him standing in front of the cameras, calm and deliberate. "I entered an agreement to protect my reputation," he said. "But somewhere along the line, I found someone who made me want to earn it instead of buy it. Whatever you think of me, leave her out of it. She does not owe anyone an explanation." The reporters erupted with questions, but he walked away without another word. Clara turned off the television and sat in silence. For the first time since meeting him, she saw the man beneath the armor, the one who had given up everything he built to protect what he felt. That night, Graham returned to the penthouse. His tie was gone, his steps heavy. "It is over," he said simply. "I resigned." Clara looked at him, eyes wet but steady. "You should have let them blame me." "I could not," he said. "You did nothing wrong. You just lost everything, Graham." He shook his head. "Not everything." Claude. Before she could ask what he meant, he stepped closer. The distance that had always existed between them finally vanished. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "This stopped being a deal a long time ago." She did not know how to answer. She only knew that every wall between them had already fallen. "If you were in their place, would you risk everything to defend someone you love? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below." Because for Graham and Clara, the truth was finally free, and the cost of it would change their lives forever. The following morning was unnervingly quiet. The city below seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Graham Cole stood on the balcony of the penthouse, still in the same white shirt from the night before, watching the fog drift across the skyline. He had spent 10 years building his empire, and one headline had taken it apart in less than a day. Clara stepped out from the living room, wrapped in a cardigan, her hair tied loosely. "You did not sleep," she said softly. He did not turn. "I could not. I kept hearing the same question in my head: why did I start this in the first place?" "To protect yourself," she said. He looked at her then, his eyes tired but clear. "And all I did was lose myself instead." For a moment they stood together in silence, two people stripped of everything but truth. When Graham finally spoke again, his voice was steady. "I'm going to fix this." Clara frowned. "How? You already gave up your position." He turned, a faint spark of determination lighting his face. "Positions can be replaced. Integrity cannot." That afternoon he called for a press conference. The building lobby was filled with reporters, cameras, and a crowd hungry for answers. Clara tried to convince him to let it go, but he refused. "This time," he said, "they are going to hear the truth from me, not from a leak." At exactly 2 o'clock, Graham stood before the microphones. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie gone. For once, he looked nothing like a CEO, just a man facing the world without armor. "I will not deny what was written," he began. "Yes, our marriage started as a contract. It was a mistake born of fear, pride, and a desperate need to protect my company. But somewhere in the middle of pretending, I learned that honesty is worth more than image. She did not trick me. She saved me from myself." The room fell silent. Every word echoed across the marble lobby. "I built a business out of deals and signatures," Graham continued. "But love does not need conditions. It does not need clauses. And I will not let this story end as a lie." When he stepped away from the podium, reporters called after him, asking if this meant the marriage was real. He did not answer. He simply walked out of the building, the cameras flashing behind him. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and cold. Clara was waiting by the car, tears glinting in her eyes. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he said. "You deserved someone who would choose truth, even when it costs everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the black Montblanc pen, the same one that had signed the contract months ago. "This wrote our lie," he said quietly. "I would rather use it to write something real." He unfolded a single sheet of paper and handed it to her. It was a letter, written in his handwriting. "No contracts, no rules, just us, if you still want that." Clara read the words, her hands trembling. "Are you sure?" she asked. "For the first time," he said. "I am." The rain came harder now, but neither of them moved. He reached for her hand, and this time, she did not pull away. "You could have everything back," she said. "Your title, your reputation." He shook his head. "I would rather keep what I found." She smiled through her tears. "And what did you find?" "The only thing I never knew I needed," he answered. "You." The sound of rain softened, wrapping around them like forgiveness. "If you were given a second chance to rewrite your story, would you choose truth over pride? Tell us your answer in the comments below." Because in that moment, standing in the rain with no witnesses and no lies left to tell, Graham Cole finally learned what it meant to sign something not with ink, but with his heart. A full year had passed since the day the contract was torn apart. Winter had returned to Chicago, brushing the city with quiet snow and pale light. The story of Graham Cole's scandal had faded into the background, replaced by new headlines, new faces, new noise. Yet for those who had watched from the start, the story had not ended in disgrace. It had turned into something no one could have predicted, a story of redemption. The Cole Evans Foundation was opening its first community art center, built in a renovated warehouse by the river. Inside, the walls were bright with color murals painted by children, sketches donated by local artists, and a single framed letter at the entrance. It was the handwritten note that had once ended their contract. The plaque beneath it read, "Real promises do not need signatures." Cameras flashed as Graham and Clara arrived together. He was no longer the untouchable CEO in tailored armor. He had traded boardrooms for classrooms, investments for mentorships. His new suit was simple, his demeanor humble. But the way he looked at her had not changed. The host handed him a microphone. "Mr. Cole, the world watched you fall and then rebuild. What made you start this foundation?" Graham looked at the crowd, then at Clara standing beside him. "Because the most valuable investment is the one that changes lives instead of balance sheets. And because I was lucky enough to meet someone who taught me that love is not a transaction, it is an action." And applause filled the room. Clara felt tears rise but held them back with a smile. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, her voice calm and sincere. "I once believed success was measured by perfection," she said. "But perfection does not feed people, it does not heal them, and it certainly does not love them. What we built here is for those who feel unseen, because once we both were." The audience stood clapping. Among them were reporters who had once written cruel headlines. Today, their cameras captured something different, not scandal, but strength. After the ceremony, the crowd slowly dispersed. Graham and Clara walked toward the riverwalk behind the building, the air filled with snowflakes that melted on their coats. He carried a small velvet box in his pocket, the weight of it steady against his palm. "I have something for you," he said quietly. Clara turned, curious. "You already gave me everything, Graham." "Not everything," he said. He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring. "The first time I asked you to marry me, it was a business decision. The second time, I want it to be a promise." Her breath caught. "Are you sure?" "For the first time, yes," he said with a small smile. "There is no contract, no headlines, no board. Just me asking the woman I love if she will stay." Clara looked at him, tears glimmering like the snow. She took the ring from the box and placed it on her finger herself. "This time," she said softly, "it is my choice too." Graham reached for her hand. The river glimmered with reflections of city lights as the snow continued to fall. For a long moment, they said nothing because some endings do not need words. Behind them, the sign for the Cole Evans Foundation glowed in warm gold light. Inside, the children's laughter echoed faintly through the halls. Cameras outside the building captured their silhouettes as they stood together, no longer pretending, no longer hiding. If you were in their place, would you forgive a lie that led to real love? Tell us in the comments below. Because for Graham and Clara Cole, the story that began with a contract ended with a choice to love without terms, to lead with truth, and to believe that sometimes the best deals in life are the ones written by the heart.